Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. Government, labour and business need to craft a new social compact for the mining industry to avoid the risk of another event like Marikana. Mining Weekly editor Martin Creamer tells us more. Welcome, Martin.
Thanks, Shannon.
Now, Weber Wenzel's Peter Leon has said that migrant labour needs to be addressed, but Deputy President Kgalema Motlanthe says it needs to be removed altogether. What are the implications of this?
Yeah, I think that migrant labour has certainly been with us in a very crude form for far too long. I mean, it's just been going on for decades, and the problem now is that you have people in the age group of 48, 49 who have got 10 or 12 years to go before retirement, and people are saying, well, shouldn't we let them work out this situation because they've got used to this way of working. It's going to be very hard to just say to them, look, you're going to live in a different way, because often you have a person who's a migrant labourer now, and his father was a migrant labourer, his great-grandfather was a migrant labourer. It's been going on like this. It's been a bit of a curse for South Africa. So they're saying, nobody has come up with a solution as to what we've got to do for these people. They've also got human dignity. They also need to be dealt with. And others are saying, well, look, I think the way you can deal with it is by at least adopting global best practice. That globally this sort of migrant labour does take place. But there are certain rules that apply, and one of them is certain work cycles. And these work cycles that we've got in South African mines are far too long. People who live far from their families very rarely see them because they go home at Christmas or Easter, and some of them don't have normal leave. So it is really a big problem. And I think in principle one would agree with the Deputy President. I mean, he lived in this situation himself. He was a migrant labourer. So he knows exactly what it's all about. And whoever has not done so, I think, should find difficulty in expressing opinion on it, because I remember when the CEO of Lonmin, he was an American, he took over as CEO for a short time, Brad Mills. He actually took the trouble of going to live in the hostels. And after he did that, he said, these have got to go. And he was quite a hardened miner. He had been an operator of big equipment on the mines, etc. He is a geologist. But that was his prognostication for Lonmin, a decade ago.
And that's where the problem is.
And we still have that problem. I think he called Bishop Tutu in as well. And they sat in the shebeens with all the workers, etc., and decided, no, this wasn't the way to operate, that the system was bad. So I think there will be practical difficulties, but they've got to look at it very harshly.
And on the other hand, CEO Graham Briggs of Harmony has defended the hostel system.
And migrant labour system. He's saying most of his mines are in the Free State. Most of his migrant labour comes from Lesotho. It's only 2 hours drive, really, and people are getting home frequently. In a lot of these mines already, the workers' families are living in normal residential areas around the mine. So there is a sort of a transition that people are going through, but he's still got 38% of his people living in hostels, and that's when the questions are asked, and that's when he's saying, look, we're reforming these places, we're having one person per room. I mean, the fact that they haven't got one person per room at this stage, doesn't sound good to me, particularly when they're making the sort of money that they are. That they should say, okay, we've still got till 2014, and we'll do it when we have to. I think they should try and be ahead of the game. And I noticed that Anglo Gold Ashanti are now spending another 400 million, on accommodation and community structures, because they need to really restructure the whole accommodation issue and make sure that they take the sting out of it.
If you think some school children go to schools in hostels, and that is better accommodation than mining communities when they have so much more money.
Exactly. Some of these hostels, I've been to the Goldfields converted hostels. Some of them were converted to single room quarters and also family units, and their family homes. Some of them are fabulous. So we need to keep abreast of that. A lot of the mining journalists, they don't follow that enough. And I think they will. Those so-called soft issues have become very hard issues at the moment. So I'm sure people will be making sure that they get exposure for some of the accommodation that they're putting up, because some of it is very good. Some of it, I hear, is absolutely shocking. But you need to go and evidence that for yourself.
And I suppose give credit where it's due.
Yes.
Peter Leon also mentioned the complete failure of black economic empowerment, especially in Rustenburg's platinum belt.
Yeah, you're saying, look, if you want to get an example of how, black economic empowerment hasn't brought wealth to the communities, go to the Rustenburg's platinum belt. I mean, platinum, this great metal, and through these living out allowances, they've allowed shacklands to develop and tin shanties with no roads, no refuse collection, no sewage, no water infrastructure. It really does not reflect to the credit of the mining industry, and also to the local authorities. I mean, they've been just ignoring their own bylaws and getting money to do this sort of thing, but how they've used it, I don't know, because it doesn't seem to have come down to the community level. So a lot of questions being asked, people saying, let's have a new social compact and, start doing things from scratch, because how did we go so wrong? We spent 7 years from 1994, South Africa, talking about this mining legislation. Finally, in 2001, they bring it out, and it's just, it's a massive failure of policy. It's a massive failure of not only government policy, corporate policy, labour policy. Everyone's fallen down on this. So a rethink is urgent.
At least Deputy President Kgalema Motlanthe did admit that government also needed to play its part.
I think they certainly do, because they're the ones that have been in this with everybody else. The agreements have been reached, and it seems that one thing they can do immediately is change the regulations to insist on broad-based black economic empowerment that takes into account the communities and the labour, which I think would at least be something that would spread the wealth a little bit wider. And people who go into West Africa say, you can see that there's more aggressive insistence on communities developing, whereas you don't see it here. The near-mine communities and communities in general don't seem to have benefited from black economic empowerment. It hasn't spread to them.
Now, what do you think the routes are out of this predicament? It must be a win-win situation for everyone, ultimately.
And there are two win-win routes that, came up at the Junior Mining Conference there, where, the two big issues are human dignity from the worker point of view and productivity from the employer point of view. And if you can get your productivity right from the actual shareholders' point of view, etc., and enhance your human dignity, you could bring in a new era for mining, and everybody could win, because the government would get more, and it's looking for rents. It would get more taxes, etc., and labour would get better pay, which would also impact on the community situation. And the mines would get better profits. Their margins are squeezed at the moment. It's probably the worst time for labour to engage in unrest, because the margins are being squeezed. So I think those are two things people say. You can get out of this by enhancing human dignity, giving the worker a much better show, and at the same time demanding productivity. Because if they don't get that productivity, and it's also going to involve some mechanization and automation, which means jobs could be threatened unless you can grow. Jobs are going to be lost, and we don't want that either.
Well, a happy worker is a productive worker.
For sure.
Well, thank you very much, Martin.
It's a great pleasure, Shannon.
That's the show for today. Join us again next time for more news and insight into what's happening in the mining world.